Alrighty then, hey guys, what's up? It's Sisn't here with a video about The Witcher cosplay. What with The Witcher being popular at the moment with the Netflix show coming out, I believe at the end of the year, I thought that it would be a fun idea to create a video of me making the cosplay. So I've already done the Ursine armor from the game, but that wasn't enough for me. That really just gave me the bugs. So now we're going to make the Manticore Armour. So, I'm going to break it down bit by bit. So each component will have its own video. This one's just going to be the shirt, obviously. The title goes up there. Title should say that, obviously. Basically, this is going to be a little bit of a learning experience for myself. I'm certainly by no means an expert at any of this stuff, so shirt obviously mostly will be working with linen and sewing machines and such like, and I don't have any kind of formal training or background in textiles. So we're certainly going to make mistakes along the way, but it should be fun. We'll learn, we'll laugh, we'll live, and at the end of it, we will have a lovely shirt to go with our Manticore Armour, and hopefully we'll be able to get the whole set of Manticore Armour finished before the series, because I'm sure that once the series comes out, I'll be preoccupied with wanting to make all of the armours from that. So without further ado, let's begin. So basically, the first thing that I did was find a shirt that fit me decently. My torso's a weird shape, so that wasn't as trivial a step as it seems like. I outlined it very close. I traced exactly around the edges. The sleeves aren't going to be part of this, which is why I'm sort of fart-assing about them and just getting kind of the shape of a torso panel. The linen underneath it is folded in half so that when I mark this, I can save time and cut out both the front and back panel at once. So as I'm cutting it, I'm cutting a couple of inches or 50 millimeters away from the line that I drew, just to give me a little bit to play with. I'm not being super precious about this. I didn't make an indent for the collar. I did try to do this following the example of one Makara Tuas by draping over me and drawing and figuring out and cutting, and it was a disaster. So that's why I've used the shirt as a template. The collar on the Manticore shirt is different than just a collared shirt, such as like the one that I had available to me, hence leaving all of the extra meat there. So the next step, after cutting it out obviously, is to start sewing it together. Here you can see my grandmother's antique hand-me-down sewing machine and a bunch of bulldog clips, because I started this before I was properly equipped and am an idiot. So basically, yeah, just going along the hems, you can slightly see the blue line to the left there. I'm just basically keeping anywhere inside of that 2-inch gap that I gave myself. I gave myself heaps of room to play with because I really wasn't confident, and I just wanted to make sure that it would all hold together without coming unraveled at the seams. And of course, always making sure to go back and forth over the start and finish of the stitches. And of course, always making sure to get all the shit caught on the foot. So then, The next step, after we've done the seams down the sides and on the shoulders, is to cut the front opening. This is a button-down shirt, it buttons open in the front. I'm just folding it roughly in half. I say roughly, you can see me being really precious about the edge here. It's still inside out, so that's not even the final dimensions of the shirt. You can be pretty rough with this. So I've just folded it. I'm just using the seam basically as a guide to cut down the middle of it. Again, this is all super rough. It doesn't have to be exactly, you know, you can always, if it comes out lopsided, you can always adjust things later on. That being said, I do try and get it close to right. Mistakes that you make early on compound themselves towards the end of the project. So here you can see I've folded the rough shape of the collar and I've held it together with a couple of real sewing pins, almost like I'm a real seamster. I don't know the right word for that. When Adam Savage decides what he's calling himself, just call me that, please. So basically, again, just going down the front, you can see that this one's fairly wide, and that's because later on we're going to have the 2 rows of black stitching that run up and down it. I would say that the black stitching is going to be decorative, but let's be honest, it's holding the whole thing together, and here you can see the mistake that I made of not rolling the edge of it so that I'm only sewing through 2 layers here. You can see frayed edges on the inside of the shirt, is my point. I don't know how to describe that. I'm not really equipped with the correct sewing terminology. And that is the hazard of working with antique sewing machines. The electric motor on this one's shot to shit and it ended up biting me after I hit it. So, you know, let that be a lesson to everyone. You know? Percussive maintenance not always the answer. Treat the machine with respect. So what, like here? Is that good?
Yeah, I can see everything. Yep.
Okay, so the next part of the plan is, I don't think I need to take the sides in because, I mean, it fits
I wouldn't take it in any
like
further.
a thing, you know? It's going to be buttoned up the front. In the game, the top is unbuttoned, so I want that to be open. That's how I want it. So the next step, I think, is to basically cut off the bottom. So when I made it, I went a little bit long because it's better to have too much and be able to cut some off than to have it too short and not be able to add anything on. This is, because it's from a game, it's not like historically accurate or anything, but the outfits from The Witcher 3 are fairly like closely based on historical garments from like the 14th, 15th century. So I'm only going to cut this much off. It will leave it kind of long. Once I do this, I'm going to, you know, fold it back up and stitch it and all that sort of thing. Because, like I said, this will be being tucked into trousers, so it won't need to necessarily be long as a real garment from the time period or whatever would be. So So the next step is basically just going to be folding this up, which I believe is called hemming, and then we're going to get our pins that I went and bought rather than just continuing to use bulldog clips like an idiot. So yeah, just going to pin all along here and then sew the whole thing up. Alright, so now we've got the vest part of the shirt done, it's time to make the sleeves. Now I'm going to be using a template here, and that's because I did measurements of myself and actually made templates on paper when I was making a gambeson previously. So I've got this template for a sleeve that I know fits me because it's measured to my arm. So you can just run a measuring tape around your arm and then sort of, you know, put that on construction paper and draw the wedge if you want. If you have like an older shirt, like I traced around a shirt that fit me for the template for the shirt, you can just, I don't know, cut the arm off, cut along the seam and then lay it out flat and trace around that. I don't have a shirt that fits well that I want to ruin, so I'm gonna go with this. Now, the complication is that the shirt under the Manticore Armour has the seam running along the outside, not the inside. And obviously, when I made the template, I was making it for one that is the other way around. So it's asymmetrical as well, but that doesn't really matter, that'll come out in the wash. Basically what I'm going to do now is to draw a line down the middle of this. Then we're going to transpose it onto this. So basically, you'll see the shape when it comes out, but basically I'm just going to have half of this, so this side and this side will be together and we'll have a cut down the middle. So. So when I open it up, I can see that the shape that I've drawn is roughly the same width along the key points, but importantly you can see that the top is V-shaped rather than a curve, so we're just going to cut this out. Yeah, you totally can't see those lines. I didn't realise how poorly that would show up on the camera when I was filming it. Also, I think this one was actually a real fabric pencil, so there you go. I guess they're not, you know, meant to be heaps permanent and stand out a lot. So, mission accomplished. And then the next step is just to hem the sleeves. So the first thing is to just pinch it together, pin it all along the line, and then sew them together inside out.
I'm probably over-explaining this a lot for anyone who knows what they're doing, but this was a brand new experience for me, so I hope you enjoy watching me do it all wrong, those of you who do know what you're doing. So after I put the first line of thread through it, I'm just using an iron here to roll the hem. So what I'm doing is rolling it so that it's layered over itself twice, using the iron just to hold that down rather than use pins. For a hem this thin, it was surprisingly bulky, and I was really having trouble getting the pins to work in a way that wasn't a monumental pain in the ass. And doing it with the iron wound up being easier and faster than trying to finagle the pins. So really recommend using this method if you are going to try it. And again, I'm sure that this was existing knowledge for a lot of you. Incidentally, this shot is great. Look at how much that machine is rocking. This is ridiculous. Don't use machines like this. They rock the whole table. It's only because the camera is mounted on the back of a chair next to the table that the camera itself isn't shaking ridiculously. So, you know, lessons learned. We'll apply these next time. Now the next step, of course, is to get a brand new sewing machine. And here I'm putting the black thread decorative, air quotes decorative, stitching up the front of the shirt. So I did want to be very careful here, just using my hand to turn the wheel to get the needle exactly where I want it so that I can rotate it around the collar and have it all go through in one smooth run. The collar is the hero part. That's the part that's most visible, that has the black bars on it. Once you get down to the bottom of the shirt, once the doublet's done up, you can't see any of it, so it's not really that important. It's very important that the collar has those two black bars completely parallel and that there aren't any breaks in the stitching, because there isn't in the game. The Manticore Armour is a very nice set of armour that you get into Snout that's put together properly, and it was very important to me to get that corner in particular right, because that's a distinctive part of it. So then I just go back along with a second row of black thread, basically just following the edge of where the linen folded back over, trying to stay as symmetrical as possible, and just going through 2 layers of material. So basically same operation again, just wanting to make sure that my lines are super straight. At this point I'm not heaps worried, but I get way too precious about stuff anyway. And then we'll get up to the collar and have another little pivot. Now, to put a hem on the end of the sleeves, I don't want it to be uneven, I don't want it to be gross in the end of the material, because if I need to take my gloves off because I'm hot, or I want to use my phone or whatever, like, the ends of it need to be presentable. So basically, I've just really roughly folded that over itself twice, taken the end plasticky bit off the sewing machine. It has a name, I'm sure. I'll Google it later, don't worry about it. And then just literally go around it once. Easy peasy. It was a real order of operations thing, just figuring out where it needed to be inside out, where it needed to be the right way around. So the next step
is to create some buttons for the shirt. Now, you could just use regular buttons, but because I'm brain damaged, I'm going to make my buttons out of leather. So I've made a little test one here. I can see that that is about the size that I want for the front of the shirt that I have, which came out to 5/8 inch punch. So that's what I'll be using. Obviously, do whatever suits you. So what I've got here is just a couple of pieces of old scrap leather. Here's a nice piece that's quite supple. You can see how that's moving. Now, these pieces are very old garbage bits of scrap that aren't going to be too flexible, so they'll be quite good for the buttons. So it's just a simple matter of lining the punch up. So, cutting leather is a what? It's a cutting operation. Good job. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to moisten the leather that I have here with my leather cloth sponge. So, I've got my old rubbish bit of scrap here. Incidentally, this is why it's a good idea to keep the tiny bits of scrap that you don't think will come in handy. So I'm basically just going to get as much moisture onto that as I can to enable the cutting operation to go more smoothly. You can see it changing colour. Once it absorbs the moisture, it'll change back to the way that it was. Just going to quickly put a little bit on the back. You can see that this is only just damp as well. You don't need heaps and heaps of water. You don't want to get to the point that you can see like clear droplet marks. Like if I ring this up and squeeze it, like it's not coming out. There is enough moisture to discolor it. So you'll notice it becomes a little bit more pliable when it's damp, but once it returns to, you know, its normal level of moisture, it will still be firm enough to be used as a button. So basically, I'm just going to get my hole punch here. So this might take a little bit of doing, and just whale away at it. So now that I've got all of my little buttons here, you can still very clearly see the flesh side or the suede side or the fuzzy side or whatever it is that you happen to call it versus the skin side or the smooth side. So I've got 6 of those. Here's the earlier one that I made, the happy little pig snout. So punch it to whatever size is convenient for you. You might be using string or waxed thread or what have you. I'm going to be using some leather twine that I picked up. Is twine even the right word for it? A little bit of leather lacing, I guess. Kangaroo lacing. So the only reason that I'm bringing this up is because this is all that I've sized my holes for. So just size your holes the correct size for the lacing to pass through it. Now it's going to make a liar out of me. There we go. Just make the holes the right size for the lacing to pass through reasonably uninhibited. So these will be fastened to the shirt with this lacing, and then the other side of the shirt will have little knots made of this lacing that will sort of loop around like so. That's what's going to hold our shirt closed. So the next thing to do here, I believe that this is still on the correct size. I have a wheel punch here. I don't actually know all of the sizes of this off the top of my head. If you're in the same boat, here's an easy way to tell if it's going to work. Just grab an extra bit of scrap, punch a hole through it, check the thing that you want to go through the hole. Oh hey, it worked. I mean, it sounds easy, but like, I don't know. I've ruined projects by being dumb before, so I might as well espouse common sense while I have a platform too. So I don't need to be super precise or super precious about these. I'm just going for roughly, yeah, that one's too low down on the y-axis. The centers should be about there, but I'm happy with the spacing there. The reason I don't need to be too precious about these is because there are 6 buttons and precisely one of them is actually visible through the leather doublet that's on the armor. So I'm basically just going to do 6 of these, pick my favorite, have that be the hero button, and then have all of the other buttons hidden.
Grant, why is it so necessary to make all of the buttons so perfect and actually out of leather if you're not actually going to see any of them? Why bother with any of this at all? Look, that's a good question. So, there you have it. Now I have 7 buttons? 8 buttons. Excellent. I have 2 that if I'm not happy with, I can completely get rid of. I have more than enough to close the shirt, and I can just pick the best one and have that be the hero button. Again, if you don't have wad punches, again, I picked these up on the cheap on eBay. I think I paid $20 for this whole set, which will go to tell you something of the quality of the actual cutting edge on them. But again, they get the job done. Yeah, you can easily just use store-bought buttons. Like, I'm only doing this because it lends me some sense of authenticity about what I'm doing. And the next thing to do is to combine the buttons and the shirt and the lace and put the whole thing together. Okay then, so I have given the buttons some time to dry. I've laid them out roughly where on the shirt I want them to be. And I have made sure that the process works with one test button, just to make sure. So I haven't treated or oiled these in any way. Basically, will probably be fine natural. So all that I've done is get some of this kangaroo lace. So again, you can use string or cut your own or whatever. Honestly, it doesn't really make much of a difference. And all I'm going to do is cut a length of this, about yay. Then it is simply a matter of pushing it through one, the other. The way that these are going to work is that, so in the case of, say, this one, the button sits here. There'll just be a little loop on the other side of the shirt that will loop around it to clasp the shirt together. Thus, we need a little knot underneath the button just to give it a little bit of distance from the shirt so that there's some purchase for that string. So I'm going to tie a reef knot underneath it, and this bit I am going to be a little bit pedantic about, just making sure that it's not got any twists in it, because that will increase the probability that the knot will further settle or adjust or just otherwise come shit later on, and I am not about that life. So came a little bit rubbish towards the end, but that is a reef knot, and then we've still got these 2 little tails coming off the end. So all that I'm going to do to get it through the shirt is use my awl here. Now on the reverse side, I'm literally just going to tie another knot. I'm sure that there's a better way to do this, just by the by, but that's fine. This feels like authentic and homey, you know, like working with one's hands. I can imagine myself being a peasant fixing my shirt or some nonsense. All right, so that's nice and tight, and it is nice and tight without pulling the button too close to the shirt. I'm getting terrible camera angles here. So the only other thing that I'm going to do is on this side, I'm just going to put a dot of Leathercraft cement. Just get the barest dot out. That's all I need. That's literally all I need. I'm just going to get an old scrap bit of leather, and I'm just going to use that to make sure that it's getting into all of the tiny little cracks that it needs to. Going to leave that to dry because I don't want to get glue all over the rest of the shirt, and so that's just going to sit there and dry for a bit, and then we're just going to do the same thing 4 more times, and then we'll move on to the loops. So now that the glue is dried, we have all of our buttons nicely affixed. They're not going anywhere. So now the next step is going to be to get our lacing and just put a loop through. We'll be aiming to put the loop through about here so that it can loop over the buttons nicely without exposing too much. So we want these to sort of overlap like that. So basically what I'm going to do is just leave it sit like this. We'll put the loops around and then we'll do a trial fit and see if we need to adjust anything. So all I'm doing is just trying to conserve the lace that I have. Just wind it around in a single knot or a thumb knot, whatever you want to call it. And I'm just literally just pushing that along with my nails just to try and get it as close to the edge as I possibly can. So that, I'll try and get the camera to focus properly. Very close to the edge means that I'm just not wasting much. Now the good thing about the awl is that I can poke a hole in this without tearing the threads. And that's good. That means that it's going to be less likely to fray. I can just poke a hole, push this through, and then when we pull the linen back, the weave of the linen is naturally going to tighten back over the hole that we've poked, and it's basically just going to hold that thread in place. We are going to put a spot of glue on the back of them before, just like the buttons, but that's just to make sure that with all of the rough housing that I plan to do in this shirt that nothing comes exactly loose. So I've got these two buttoned up. I've just got it pulled tight just to make sure that it's going to be in the right spot, and I'm going to aim for just over the edge here, about there. So I'll just mark that spot with my awl. I want it to be just on the other side of my black bar here. So I'm just twisting lightly as I push through. I'm not trying to rip, I'm just trying to push the fibers out of the way lightly so that I can grab this end of my lacing and just kind of gently work it through. So having done the first two, I know that a rough measure of the length that I'm going to need is just to reach almost to the other bar of black thread, but I'm going to put it around the button anyway, just to dot my I's and cross my T's. So I'm just going to wrap this around here, measure about there. I'll just pinch it to keep my spot, and I can see that when I'm holding the, oh god, you probably can't see very well. When I can see that I'm holding it to where I was pinched, there we go, basically almost to the black line. So I know that I'm pretty sound in my measurement. And I know that I want the second hole about the same distance in from the center. If you want to do it in terms of fractions, it looks like the hole is about
1/4 of the way in from the edge. Then we've got the next 50% of the button there, and the next 1/4 by length. So I'm going to want the next hole roughly here. Again, it's not exactly precision measuring, but for what we need it for, it's fine. So I'm just going to push that through there, just shy of making it to the black stitching in a loose loop. And the great thing about this is, like I said, we're going to do a test fit at the end. If it's too loose, I can tighten it. If I can't get it done up, then I can loosen the knots and allow more thread through. So it's fine for it to be approximate now. We are going to do a test fit later. So what I will do though is, notice that I'm going to hold that there, flip this around, and now that I've got it flipped, either side of this is fine because we're not going to see this. I'm just going to get a marker. I'm just going to mark the point roughly at which it goes through the linen. Whoops. Excellent. And because I've marked that point, I can now pull through as much as I want. And I've got a little bit more to work with. It's just a pain in the ass trying to work with a tiny, tiny little bit and still tie a knot in it. So I can be fairly extravagant with my knot tying now, because I know that I only need to make sure that the knot rests against that black bar. Something such as like that there. So you should just be able to see a little black line there. And then when I pull the slack through, messily, come on, there we go. When I pull the slack through, we're going to see that it is again just shy of those black bars. And when I flatten my shirt out and do this button up, you'll see that it is just enough length to pass over the button and capture it, but it is a short enough length that it's not going to fall out. It is going to fasten the shirt together. So that's exactly what we want. Now we've got 3. I've just got the final 3 to go. So, test fit, all came out pretty well. Fits well to my body. You can see it gapping and you can hear the leather creaking a little bit when I really puff my chest out, but I can twist, I can raise my arms, I can lower my arms. All of the seams in the shoulder are fine and it fits reasonably well. Bearing in mind, of course, that linen isn't a stretchy fabric. It was never going to be like spandex form fitting. But as far as a shirt that was made to my measurements, I'm pretty chuffed with how this one has turned out. So, this is the first part of the Manticore Armour completed. So,